Welcome to Ride JBI. I'm JB. Today I'm back with Anthony Moreno with another ride report on the WP XACT Pro 6500 kit. In the first video we linked up at Lake Elsinore and we rode his bike and we did a comparison with the JBI suspension WP AER Pro fork versus the baseline setting of the WP XACT Pro fork. We'll link that video down in the description if you want details on that. Today on this video, myself, Anthony, and my coworker Jordan all linked up at Cahuilla Creek Raceway, and each of us has a 350. I ride a KTM, Jordan has a gas, and Anthony also has a gas 350. I started the day off with the JBI spec WP XACT Pro fork, a new setting that we are experimenting with. Anthony started off the day with his bike exactly as is, just so he could be acclimated and just remember his baseline. And then Jordan started off the day with the WP Kit cone valve forks. After we all rode for a little bit, we came back into the pits and we started swapping forks. The first fork that was put on to Anthony's bike was this one here, which is the baseline WP XACT 65 Pro kit fork. And I'll let Anthony tell you about his experience.
Yeah, so right away, I rode both tracks at Cahuilla Creek MX, both the vet and the main track. So we swapped these forks onto my bike, went on to the main track. There's a couple sections first, and then I did about a 5 to 7 lap moto. And right away, I had very similar thoughts to this fork as I did at Lake Elsinore, comparing them from Lake Elsinore to Cahuilla Creek, and that is being very good on small to medium-sized bumps, is very supple at the top of the stroke, great bottoming out resistance, and it takes away a lot of the harshness that you can feel with an air fork. With this spring fork, it follows the ground a little bit better, gets away some of that harshness and that cheap feeling that you can have with an air fork on slap down landings or through bumps.
From there, we pulled back in, and this time I took off the JBI spec XACT Pro forks and we mounted those onto Anthony's bike. On my personal bike, I mounted the WP cone valve kit forks that were on Jordan's bike, and Jordan mounted these up to his motorcycle so he could get a feeling for that. And we'll let Anthony continue with his experience of the JBI spec WP XACT Pro forks. Again, those will be the silver tube forks you see in the video, DLC lower, and black bottoms.
So when we swapped forks to the JBI spec of the WP 6500 Cartridge Kit, that's when the fun really started happening. Like, I was not afraid to overjump stuff. It had great bottoming out resistance, even more so improved than the as-is WP 6500 settings from WP. It was even more supple on the top, more mid-stroke support, and overall just a very comfortable and confidence-inspiring while you're out on the bike. I also noticed a huge increase in traction. So if you're in a berm, a flat turn, or even a rut, you can kind of square out of it a little bit earlier, and I think that's due to just the spring fork nature tends to follow the ground a little bit more, provides you some more traction, and it's supple over those bumps. So you always know where your front wheel is in the dirt. With the air fork, it could feel a little vague at times. With the spring fork, like I said, follows the ground a lot better, and you always know where that front wheel is. So you can just turn on a dime with these forks, and I was beyond impressed. I think you'll see me on a set of spring forks here very shortly.
After some more riding, we went back to the pits, and we all swapped forks for a third time. This time, the WP cone valve kit forks that we had were mounted onto Anthony's bike, and I'll let him share his experience with those.
Yeah, so when the cone valves found its way to my bike, that was the first time they've ever been on my bike and the first time I've ever rode a set of WP cone valve forks. So I was pretty curious coming in, did a handful of laps on the vet track at its worst. So we were riding until like, I think 2:15, 2:30. So the track was pretty beat, dry, hard pack. And they were great. The forks were pretty amazing. But that being said, though, I didn't notice a huge performance difference from the JB spec of the WP 6500 Cartridge Kit forks to the cone valve forks. And one of my first impressions was, wow, this cone valve fork actually feels a little bit heavier. So that was one of the first things that I noticed, but it had great or amazing small bump sensitivity, that suppleness on the top of the stroke, great bottoming out resistance. I was over jumping stuff by a handful of feet, and it just soaked it up, no problem. Great traction once again, like I had mentioned with the JB spec of the 6500 cartridge kit forks. Great traction in the turn, so you can really square up a turn early, and it's very confidence inspiring. Having that freedom to, hey, I could just pin it all the way around this turn, and the fork's just going to eat up that small to supple chop. Or I could just dive in a little bit early, cut out early, and get hard on the gas. So it was great doing this back to back to back and in succession. I think my favorite fork was probably the JB spec with the 6500 cartridge kit. That fork was just very well balanced. It was smooth, plush, had great bottoming resistance, good mid-stroke support, and it just did everything I really wanted to. I always knew where the front wheel was on the ground or the terra firma, and it was great all around. Especially the cone valve fork was great too. But like I said, I did notice it was a little bit heavier, but overall, what a great day. Like, to test all those forks back to back was unreal. And if you're curious about this, if you have a buddy who has a set of cartridge kit forks or even revalved air forks or a cone valve, try it on your bike. It only takes a couple of minutes to swap out forks real fast, and you can really like that feedback a little bit more.
I feel like I had very similar experiences and feedback as well for it. My day started off a little different. On my bike was the JBI Spec XACT Pro forks, and I had not ridden those yet, and it had been about a week or two since I had last ridden, and I had last ridden on these forks. So out on the track, the forks felt pretty similar, but they did seem to be quite a bit more supple on the initial contact of bumps, especially if it's a succession of bumps, as you would find leading into a corner, so under heavy braking and coming out. The forks seem to be a little less chattery. So at first I thought, wow, like, is this setting really that much better than what we were riding, or has it just been a while since I rode this fork and it works quite well? And in terms of bottom resistance, it felt really good. Felt like the other fork did as well. It almost felt better, even though that kind of would be counterintuitive if it's being more supple up top. I think the reason for that is we may have been using a little bit more of the travel, so engaging more of the bottoming cone, and still not using all of it, but at that point in the travel, you can really feel the forks firm up, but in a good way, to prevent it from bottoming. So after I rode for a bit, I pulled in, and the forks that went onto my bike were these ones after that. Right there, it became very apparent that we had really made an improvement on the JBI spec with a more comfortable feel to fork. By no means were these bad. They work really freaking well, but it made it very apparent that we had done a good job increasing the comfort without the expense of losing bottoming. And then after that, we went back to the pits, and for my third ride, it was on the cone valve kit forks. With those, I thought they were incredibly plush and comfy, and sometimes I wouldn't even feel bumps that I could see I was going into. That I was very impressed about. They felt a little soft overall compared to the other specs, so we could use the fork travel a little more often while riding. By no means was it limiting me in how I could ride or how I wanted to ride. It was just something that kind of stood out to me. With that in mind, it kind of gave me an idea of, wow, can we maybe make a setting in between these two settings? That may be possible, that may not be, but that was the fun thing about today, as Anthony pointed out, was in quick succession we could try different fork settings or different forks, but all relatively pretty similar in setup and all on our own personal bikes. So we all felt at home, comfortable, and our changes were very isolated to the front end only. So with that, we had a great day testing, and the JBI spec fork is not going to be our all means spec we start providing now. We're going to do some more work on that and see how far we can make it. Our next goal is to actually tune these brown forks and make them similar like we did to the silver ones, but maybe go even further with that setting and see how far we can go before we begin to get some compromise somewhere else in the setup and have it not work as well. And that'll be a really good learning experience when we do, and we'll share with you when that happens. Thanks for watching these videos. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.